It's time for episode 28 of the Mystical Times blog podcast with me, Michelle Eve. This episode is all about haunted pubs and inns. The spooky experiences that I will share with you come from the books UK Haunted Hospitality, Volumes 1 and 2 by Dr. Paul Lee. Dr. Paul Lee kindly shared these experiences from these books with me for this podcast episode, so I highly recommend checking out his books on Amazon, and I've attached the links to the show notes. Pubs and inns in the UK have their roots from when the Romans first introduced the selling of wine and food to soldiers and travellers. So with hundreds of years of pubs and inns being frequented, some used as places for inquests into crime, such as murder, then it's no surprise that many of these establishments are said to be haunted. Let's make our way to the first haunted public house and inn. The Fountain Inn is a historic public house and inn which is located in Park End, in the Forest of Dean. The land on which this building was built upon was once part of a royal enclosure called Whitemead Park. There have been numerous reports of ghostly figures that have been witnessed by the patrons and staff alike. In the mirror of a disabled toilet, a figure of a woman with short dark hair was seen standing behind the occupant of this cubicle. This spectre has also been seen reflected in one of the pub's windows. A watchful ghostly figure has also been spotted standing by one of the bedrooms, as well as it being seen in the pub kitchen. The figure quickly disappears once it has been seen. The pub kitchen has seen some strange activity, with inanimate objects such as a serving spoon being seen swinging whilst hanging on a rack, whilst the rest of the utensils have been still. A notice that was hanging on the wall above the kitchen dishwasher was seen to be hurled off the wall by unseen hands. There have been many reported sightings of a male figure seen by the front door. It is then seen walking towards the fireplace, and it's also seen by the bay window, and the last reported sighting was of this figure standing in the bay window whilst the pub was closed. There have also been sightings of a ghostly boy who wears a blue top, and he has been seen walking past the bottom of the cellar steps. There have been so many sightings and strange experiences that a diary had been started by the pub in which they now document these strange happenings. These include hearing footsteps outside room 1. The footsteps sound as though someone is walking past the room and are then heard as though that person has fallen over. Similar footsteps are heard outside room 7. People staying in room 6 have reported smells, such as tobacco and burnt toast, coming from outside the room. Phantom smells of flowers and candles being extinguished have also been smelt in the bar area. For our next haunted pub, we travel around 6 miles to St. Brivel's and pay a visit to the George Inn. St. Brivel's stands on the edge of a limestone plateau 800 feet above the Wye Valley, and the village is behind the remains of a 12th century castle, which is now a very haunted youth hostel. So it's no surprise that the George Inn is said to be haunted. The stone-built pub has an interesting history. In 1891, Lord Charles Denton was the owner of the then free pub. He had invested money into the village, as well as being on boards in helping the poor and needy. The pub was also used for holding inquests in. The George Inn has had witnesses to the ghostly sights of a cavalier and of a monk, who is noisy on the upper floor of the building, and is said to be responsible for items on that floor being moved about. There is also a ghost that has been named George. This ghost is said to misbehave in the presence of people he doesn't like, and even responds to the landlord's request of quietening down the rowdier patrons. It was reported that in January 2024, strange activities in the building were still being witnessed. A brother and sister who work at the pub have been exposed to some strange happenings. The sister would notice that doors would open on their own, but only when it was her inside the building. Her brother would stay overnight on his own and would see the door handles go up, then hear a heavy metal cast iron clank, but never heard the downwards clank, which would happen when opening up the door. The next morning he found a chair against the doorway, and it had been a doorway he had used to pass through the previous night. One night the brother was staying in the pub. He was awakened around 4 a.m. and saw some sort of figure above him on the ceiling. He had the sense of mind to get his phone out and take a photo. The photo shows a shape, illuminated by the blue lights of the Wi-Fi system. The photograph is described as looking as a semi-skeleton with lungs, a spine, head, and what looks like to be a nose and eye. Lastly, for this episode, we'll take a trip down to Glastonbury in Somerset for our next haunted pub and inn, the George and Pilgrim Hotel. On a personal note, it was around 2010 when my hairdresser told me she would be staying at this particular place for the following week. As she put her hands on my hair, I saw a vision of a Knights Templar in full regalia inside the George and Pilgrim. She took note of what I had seen, and we carried on chatting about other things. It was during the week of her stay she contacted me to tell me there had been a life-size model of a Knights Templar in full regalia inside the entrance of the George and Pilgrim, just as I had described to her. Back to the hauntings. There is said to be a jolly plump monk dressed in a brown habit who haunts one of the rooms and also walks throughout the corridors, making the floorboards creak as he walks around. The story behind this haunting is that he hanged himself in the building. Yet another story is that he was discovered having an affair with a woman and was bricked up alive for this. According to other witnesses, this ghostly monk is seen being followed by an elegant-looking woman ghost. Other reports of ghostly activity include the unexplained stamping noises of the dray doors in the entrance corridor, and in the room called the monk's cell, harp music is heard. Other guests in this room have said the TV turns on by itself, and others have reported bedclothes have been pulled off them whilst they're laying in the bed. The George and Pilgrim also say they have 27 different entities in the building, but no further information on these entities were forthcoming. That's all for this episode of Haunted Pubs and Inns, and I do hope you enjoyed hearing those spooky accounts. Don't forget to visit the links to the Haunted Hospitality books by Dr. Paul Lee for more Haunted Pubs and Inns. For the next episode, episode 29, I'll be sharing some strange happenings with witches and wizards in Winchcombe, Gloucestershire. Till next time.